The report reaches headquarters in the early hours, carried through channels already strained by weather, distance, and confusion. It arrives without ceremony, stripped of speculation. The 101st Airborne is surrounded. Roads are cut. Supply columns have failed to get through. Contact is intermittent. The town at the center of the pocket holds, but the perimeter is tightening. Bradley reads a confirmation once. Then again, the paper does not change. He places it flat on the table among maps marked with pencil lines that no longer reflect the ground. Bastogne sits at the junction of those lines, now isolated, its importance no longer theoretical. Outside, the Ardennes winter presses in. Snow muffles movement. Ice clings to vehicles and boots. Visibility remains poor, grounding air support and delaying reconnaissance. The enemy offensive, once assumed unlikely at the scale, has achieved what doctrine said it could not. Penetration is deep. Momentum is real. Bradley turns to the operations map. Reports from adjacent units show pressure on every axis. Some formations are falling back in order. Others are holding at cost. The front has lost its smooth continuity and now exists as a series of contested points connected by intent rather than certainty. The isolation of the 101st forces clarity. Bastogne controls the road network. If it falls, movement across the sector becomes a liability. Reinforcement routes narrow. Supply lines stretch under fire. What had been a dangerous situation becomes a potentially decisive one. Bradley issues instructions without raising his voice. He orders confirmation of the perimeter's status. He asks for ammunition levels, medical capacity, artillery availability. The answers come slowly, unevenly. Some are estimates. Others are hours old by the time they arrive. He listens to staff officers outline options. Immediate relief is discussed, then challenged by terrain, weather, and enemy strength. Air resupply is mentioned, then dismissed until skies clear. Holding actions elsewhere are proposed to free forces, each one carrying its own risk. Bradley does not interrupt. He allows the room to empty itself of assumptions. When he speaks, it is to narrow focus. Bastogne must hold. Relief must be planned now, even if execution waits. Units capable of movement must be identified. Command coordination must anticipate delay rather than speed. The pressure is not abstract. The 101st is lightly equipped for prolonged encirclement. Cold compounds every shortage. Casualties will rise even without direct engagement. Time works against them unless action alters the equation. Bradley considers the broader front. He understands that committing strength to Bastogne weakens other sectors already under strain. He also understands that losing the town would force far greater commitments later, under worse conditions. The choice is not between risk and safety, but between controlled risk and cascading failure. Messages go out to adjacent commands. Requests for status updates carry urgency, without embellishment. Bradley seeks alignment rather than heroics. He needs forces that can move, commanders who can adjust, logistics officers who can improvise under constraint. The enemy continues to advance elsewhere. Reports indicate armored elements pushing west, infantry consolidating gains, artillery repositioning under cover of weather. The offensive has not yet culminated. Its energy remains. Bradley returns to the confirmation report. He does not dwell on its phrasing. He treats it as a fixed point around which everything else must now move. The isolation of the 101st is not a setback to be regretted. It is a condition to be addressed. He orders planning for a relief effort to proceed immediately, even as intelligence gaps persist. Routes are examined and discarded. Alternate axes are drawn, then revised. Engineers are consulted on road conditions. Fuel availability becomes a limiting factor in every calculation. The staff senses a shift. Discussion becomes more disciplined. Proposals shorten. The room adjusts to the reality that delay is no longer neutral. As the morning advances, the weather shows no sign of easing. Snow continues to fall. Aircraft remain grounded. The pocket holds, but pressure increases. Artillery fire probes a perimeter. German units test for weakness. Bradley understands that the coming hours will define not only the fate of the 101st, but the integrity of the front. The report has ended one phase of uncertainty and begun another, sharper one. He remains at the table, hands resting near the maps, waiting for the next update. The isolation has been confirmed. The response has begun. The next updates arrive in fragments, carried by radios that fade in and out, by runners moving through snow-choked roads, by officers who have driven through the night to speak in person. None contradict the initial report. The perimeter around Bastogne holds, but it tightens. Enemy pressure increases along the eastern and southern approaches. Ammunition expenditure rises faster than planned. Medical capacity is stretched to limits never intended for winter siege. Bradley absorbs each piece without visible reaction. He does not comment on tone or bravery. He listens for facts that can be acted upon. How long can artillery continue firing at current rates? Which roads remain passable for tracked vehicles? Where enemy armor has been sighted and where does not? The crisis expands beyond Bastogne itself. Units attempting to reposition toward relief corridors encounter resistance earlier than expected. German blocking forces appear in strength at key junctions. What was assumed to be a thin screen reveals depth. The offensive shows preparation beyond initial estimates. Bradley orders revisions to the relief concept. Speed remains essential, but mass becomes equally critical. A weak thrust will fail and invite counterattack. A delayed but decisive push offers better odds. The balance is narrow, and weather erodes it by the hour. Communications with higher command intensify. Bradley frames the situation plainly. The isolation of the 101st is not symbolic. It is operational. Bastogne is the hinge of the sector. Holding it fixes enemy forces that would otherwise deepen the penetration. Losing it opens movement corridors the enemy can exploit before reserves arrive. Within headquarters, fatigue begins to show. Staff rotate in short shifts. Maps are redrawn repeatedly as reports revise the picture. Pencil marks overlap until the paper darkens at the edges. No one assumes accuracy lasts longer than minutes. Bradley authorizes aggressive measures to slow enemy movement elsewhere. Local counterattacks are approved where they can disrupt assembly areas or delay armor. Artillery priorities shift toward interdiction rather than attrition. The intent is to steal time wherever it can be taken. The weather remains the enemy's ally. Air support stays grounded. Resupply by air to Bastogne is impossible. The defenders ration everything except resolve, which costs nothing but does not replace fuel or shells. Bradley considers alternatives that would have been unthinkable days earlier. He evaluates the possibility of holding the pocket without immediate relief if resupply can be achieved once skies clear. He weighs the cost of committing mobile reserves now versus preserving them for later exploitation. Each option carries irreversible consequences. Reports from the 101st indicate discipline holds. Defensive fires are controlled. Command remains intact. Requests are direct, not desperate. They ask for ammunition, not evacuation. They ask for coordination, not sympathy. This steadiness influences Bradley's calculus. A unit that can still function under encirclement is an asset, not a liability. It shapes enemy movement by its mere existence. It forces commitment. Bradley orders that relief preparations continue regardless of weather forecasts. Engineers are pushed forward to improve routes under fire. Fuel dumps are repositioned closer to assembly areas despite risk. Units earmarked for relief are warned that timelines will compress without notice. The enemy does not pause. Probing attacks increase around Bastogne. Elsewhere, pressure against the shoulders of the bulge intensifies. The front creaks under simultaneous demands. Bradley resists the urge to concentrate everything on one point at the expense of all others. He understands that the crisis is systemic. Bastogne is its most visible expression, but not its only danger. Stability must be preserved across the front long enough for initiative to return. As night falls again, the reports slow but do not stop. Each one reinforces the same truth. The 101st remains isolated. The window for clean solutions has closed. What remains are hard choices made under worsening conditions. Bradley stays at his post. The situation has moved beyond surprise. It has entered endurance. The third day begins without improvement in conditions, but with sharper definition of stakes. The front has absorbed the initial shock, yet it has not regained balance. The German thrust continues to press westward, its spearhead slowed but not blunted. Bastogne remains cut off, a fixed point around which movement on both sides contorts. Bradley convenes a tighter group. The discussion narrows to decision rather than assessment. Intelligence gaps remain, but waiting for clarity now carries greater risk than acting with uncertainty. The isolation of the 101st has ceased to be a developing situation. It is now a constant. Conflicting views surface. Some argue that immediate relief risks throwing limited mobile forces into prepared resistance, potentially losing both the relieving force and the pocket. Others argue that delay invites the enemy to concentrate, making relief impossible later. The room divides not on objectives, but on timing. Bradley listens, then redirects the argument. He reframes the issue not as rescue, but as control. Bastogne must not fall under enemy control, whether it is relieved today or held until conditions shift. Its role is to deny movement. Any action taken must serve that purpose. He orders updated enemy estimates along likely relief corridors. The reports confirm German armor positioned to block direct approaches. Infantry formations occupy high ground overlooking roads. Artillery is registered on key intersections. The enemy expects relief attempts and has prepared accordingly. Bradley considers an indirect approach. He weighs routes that trade speed for surprise, even under winter constraints. He accepts that relief may not arrive intact, but fragmented, forcing its way through in stages rather than as a single thrust. At the same time, he approves measures to strengthen the pocket from within. Defensive fires are coordinated to maximize effect with limited ammunition. Requests are made to prepare for immediate air resupply the moment weather allows. Liaison channels are reinforced to maintain command coherence despite isolation. The turning point comes not from new information, but from accumulation. Every hour of delay strengthens the enemy's hold on surrounding ground. Every hour also weakens the attacking formations through fuel consumption and exposure. The window is narrowing from both sides. Bradley commits. He authorizes preparation for a relief operation timed to exploit the first break in weather, even if minimal. Forces are designated. Command relationships are clarified. The operation is framed as deliberate, not reactive. It will move when conditions permit, but it will move. Orders flow outward. Units adjust posture. Assemblies begin under camouflage in darkness. Engineers work through the night to widen roads and clear obstacles. Fuel and ammunition are pushed forward despite enemy interdiction. Bradley does not announce the decision with ceremony. He treats it as necessary alignment with reality. The isolation of the 101st has forced the issue. Inaction now would be a decision of its own. Inside Bastogne, the defenders continue to hold. Their situation does not improve, but it does not collapse. Each successful defense buys time not just for themselves, but for the broader response taking shape beyond the perimeter. Bradley tracks both arcs simultaneously, the strain inside the pocket and the slow gathering of force outside it. He understands that neither can succeed alone. Relief without resistance inside would fail. Resistance without relief would eventually end. As the night deepens, the weather begins to show signs of change. Clouds thin at higher altitude. The forecast hints at partial clearing. It is not certainty, but it is enough. Bradley marks the map again, this time with firmer lines. The crisis has moved from shock to stabilization to decision. What follows will test whether coordination under pressure can reverse momentum. The isolation of the 101st remains, but it is no longer unanswered. The weather breaks unevenly, not with clarity but with opportunity. Patches of sky open long enough to matter, then close again. It is enough. Aircraft lift when they can, flying low and fast, dropping supplies into limited zones under fire. Not everything reaches the ground intact. Enough does. Bradley receives confirmation that bundles have landed inside the perimeter. Ammunition, medical supplies, food. The effect is immediate but contained. The 101st gains hours, not relief. Those hours are decisive. Outside the pocket, movement begins before daylight. Units assigned to the relief effort push forward cautiously, advancing into ground already shaped by enemy expectation. Resistance is firm. German blocking positions hold road junctions and ridge lines. Progress is measured in yards, not miles. Bradley monitors the advance without illusion. He knows this will not be a clean breakthrough. He adjusts priorities as reports arrive, reinforcing axes that show traction, slowing those at risk isolation. The relief force does not surge. It presses. Enemy reaction is swift. Artillery shifts. Counterattacks probe flanks. The Germans understand the threat as clearly as Bradley does. Bastogne is not valuable for what it contains, but for what it prevents. Bradley resists pressure to accelerate beyond coordination. He accepts casualties as a cost of contact, but not disintegration as a cost of haste. He keeps the relief effort cohesive. Even when progress tempts overextension, inside the pocket, pressure peaks. Attacks intensify as the enemy senses movement outside. The defenders absorb it, trading ground where necessary, maintaining internal lines. They do not attempt breakout. Their role remains fixed. Bradley tracks the convergence. Distance closes slowly, then unevenly. One axis stalls. Another finds space. Engineers clear obstacles under fire. Armor advances where infantry can hold ground behind it. The decisive moment does not arrive as a single event. It unfolds through accumulation. Enemy resistance weakens in one sector as resources are pulled elsewhere. Fire slackens, then resumes farther back. The relief force gains depth. Bradley authorizes continued pressure despite fatigue. He understands that hesitation now would restore enemy balance. Momentum, once regained, must be spent. When contact is finally established, it is narrow and fragile. A corridor opens, contested and incomplete. It is enough. Supplies move through under fire. Wounded are evacuated in reverse. The isolation ends not with celebration, but with function. Bradley receives a report without visible reaction. He does not mark it as victory. He marks it as transition. The pocket has been relieved, but the front remains unstable. The enemy offensive has not collapsed. It has been checked. He orders consolidation rather than pursuit. Units are instructed to widen the corridor, strengthen shoulders, prepare for counterpressure. Bastogne remains contested ground, but no longer cut off. The crisis enters its final phase. The danger of sudden rupture recedes. What remains is sustained pressure to roll back gains and restore continuity. Bradley reflects briefly on the sequence, not as narrative, but as structure. Surprise created crisis. Crisis forced decision. Decision restored control at cost. The isolation of the 101st becomes a reference point, not for heroism, but for command under constraint. It demonstrated how quickly assumptions fail and how decisively response must follow. As operations continue, Bradley turns his attention forward. The winter is not over. Neither is the war. But the moment that threatened to break the front has passed. What replaced it is not confidence, but clarity. And clarity under pressure is enough. The front settles into a different rhythm, one shaped less by shock and more by attrition. With Bastogne no longer isolated, the German offensive loses its center of gravity. Movement slows. Fuel shortages surface. Units that advance quickly now struggle to hold extended lines under constant pressure. Bradley directs operations with restraint. He does not chase the enemy blindly into winter terrain. He focuses on restoring continuity, straightening the line, eliminating salients that invite counterstroke. Each adjustment reduces risk rather than seeking spectacle. Reports from Bastogne shift in tone. They no longer describe encirclement, but integration. Artillery links are re-established. Supply schedules become predictable. Command channels stabilize. The town remains under fire, but it is once again part of the system rather than an exception to it. Bradley assesses the broader implications. The enemy has spent its surprise and much of its reserve. What remains is resistance, not initiative. The Allied response, though costly, has preserved operational integrity at the moment it mattered most. He notes the sequence without embellishment. The confirmation of isolation forced immediate prioritization. Delay would have multiplied consequences beyond recovery. Action, even imperfect, constrained the damage. Losses are tallied. They are significant. Bradley does not separate them by phase or decision. He treats them as cumulative cost, inseparable from command responsibility. The relief of Bastogne did not erase what preceded it. It ensured that the price paid had purpose. As winter deepens, Allied forces resume the broader advance with altered expectations. Speed gives way to method. Confidence is tempered by memory. The Ardennes becomes a reference point in planning rooms, a reminder that momentum invites counteraction, if not protected. Bradley carries that understanding forward. He does not frame the episode as triumph or near defeat. He frames it as correction under pressure. When a report arrived confirming the 101 Estes isolation, it stripped away abstraction. What followed was alignment between reality and response. The enemy offensive fades into containment, then withdrawal. Ground loss is reclaimed gradually, without drama. The bulge recedes not because of a single decision, but because the structure holding it together collapsed once its objective failed. Bradley remains focused on continuity to the end. He resists retrospective simplification. He knows the outcome rested on timing as much as intent, on endurance as much as choice. In the months that follow, the war moves east. New challenges replace old ones, but the winter crisis remains present, not as a story, but as a lesson embedded in process. When Bradley thinks back to the moment he received a report, he does not recall silence as absence. He recalls it as compression. In that space, options narrowed and action became unavoidable. The front did not break. That fact stands without ornament. And in a winter defined by uncertainty, that was enough.